Hello, everybody. The main people who I have been in contact with who have talked about COVID have given me a lot of good information. So I am very pleased to have him as our guest today. I'm going to do some of his bio. His bio is long because he has so many accomplishments. However, when he joins us in the studio, he can also give us a little bit more information if there's anything that I left out. But his name is Dr. Jeffrey Mount Garner. He is a ER physician. He has 20 years of experience in emergency medicine and is a leading authority on saving lives. He founded Lifeline Medical, LLC, in Maryland, and he consults with hospitals and health-related companies. He served as chairman of the emergency medicine for Howard University Hospital for 7 years. And he also has received numerous awards and honors. He is a Hampton graduate and earned his Master's of Public Health from Harvard University School of Public Health. He is an active member with the American College of Emergency Physicians, Urgent Care Association of America, and American Academy of Emergency Medicine. When he is not treating patients, he is advocating on behalf of them. And he also is a marathon runner, and he lives right here in Maryland. So let's welcome him to the studio. Here he is. And let's just start out. Let me unmute you. There was a little bit of background noise, so I had to unmute you there for a minute. So I had to put you back in. So let's just start out, though, with maybe a brief overview on what is going on with COVID today. We'll get into it a little bit more with specifics, but how are we doing with COVID? And maybe even explain a little bit of background information on COVID. A lot of people know, but you would be surprised how many people still, have some questions about exactly what is going on with this virus that has really decimated the world. So can you just give us a little bit, that's a wide open question, but can you give us just a little bit of background and then we'll get into specifics?
Sure. Well, first of all, Dr. Sheila, thank you very much for having me on your show. Thank you for this service that you are providing to the community as well.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you for coming. I really appreciate it.
I was looking forward to this, would not miss it. As it relates to COVID, let's just say things have changed greatly, obviously, from this time last year. Right now, what we are experiencing is a decrease in the number of deaths. However, as we've noticed, or as we've learned in the media, there are an increase in the number of cases, especially among those between the ages of 18 and 35. I know everyone knows that originally, most of the hospitalizations were those who were 65 and older. And it's not that the virus changed. It's not that the older group are still at risk, but that's the most vaccinated group. Hence, that's why you're seeing less hospitalizations in that group. Now, let's just talk about what's on the top of everyone's mind. These new variants. You've got the South African variant, you've got the Brazilian variant, you've got two forms of the California variant, and you've got the United Kingdom, the UK B117 variant. Rest assured, there will be many more variants. Why? Because the way viruses work is that they want to mutate. And the way that they mutate is every time they infect someone, they can possibly mutate or change, or what we call in medicine call a genetic variation. Having said all that, what we are experiencing now comes close to the fourth wave. And we knew this was coming. Here's why. The main infections now that are occurring are from the UK variant, the B117. That strain, it's more infectious and it's more contagious, and it's causing younger people to be hospitalized. I am not saying that it is changed such that it markets or focuses on younger people. I'm saying that that's the most impacted group. Here's why. We already talked about it. Most of the older people have already been vaccinated, and they were the ones who practiced social distancing and wearing the mask the most and the best. We've known for a while that those in the age groups of 18 to 35, they have in the past been the group who have practiced less social distancing, less wearing masks, and were more contagious. But because this new strain, it's more virulent, it's causing more morbidity. That's why we're seeing this group hospitalized even more. What's my point? Everyone, it is so important. It is so crucial for people to still socially distance, wear their masks, and if you are inclined to get vaccinated, which I highly recommend, get vaccinated as soon as you can. Dr. Steele, was that too much of an overview?
No, it actually was not, because I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about the variants. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think even for me, it did not click why the younger people were still were actually being affected a little bit more than the older people. I understood about the vaccines, and many older people had gotten vaccinated, but I don't even know why I didn't connect that. The number one, the variants are, as you said, more contagious, and that's why young people are being affected more. And I think that's really, really concerning, across the board, actually. But that being said, I know they opened the vaccinations up, but there's a lot of people who, especially younger people, who are not really keen on getting the vaccine. What information would you like to tell? We'll talk specifically to the younger people first, and then we'll go to the older people second, because there are many people who have that hesitancy. So let's talk to the younger people a little bit about decisions that they might think about making regarding the vaccine, or what they can do to protect themselves from not getting sick and possibly dying.
Great question. Great question. And I will say this, is that they have marketed as people of color early on that they were vaccine hesitant. Well, in order for someone to be vaccine hesitant, it means that the vaccine needs to be available and the person has some concerns about it. If it's not available, then it's not vaccine hesitant. I get it. The studies show that about 10% of Black folks are vaccine hesitant. But about 10% of but Black folks make up about 10% of this country as well. What we also know is that the military is showing that 40% of Marines are vaccine hesitant. Now, they're truly hesitant because it's available to them. Now, having said all that, what is interesting, of those who are vaccinated, who we have record of, 63% are white, and I'm so happy that they're vaccinated. Only 9% are Black, 12% are Hispanic. What's my point is that there is definitely not equity as it relates to dispensing this vaccine. And let me tell you why the vaccine is so important. The studies are very clear now. In the Pfizer study, in the Moderna study, in the Johnson & Johnson study, it was 100%. I'm gonna say it again and pause. 100% protective against causing death. Yes, it was 100% protective against causing death. I know what you're thinking. You heard about this 86%, this 68%. That was as it relates to contracting COVID, being hospitalized, so forth. But we glossed over the fact it's 100% protective against causing death. Young folks, come to me. I know what you're thinking. You say, well, COVID doesn't usually cause death in young folks. You are correct. But what we do know is that if you get infected with COVID, you can develop what we call long haul COVID. Long haul COVID. That is simply you contract COVID, you clear your body of active COVID, but you still have symptoms. Let me tell you what some of those symptoms are. Shortness of breath. There are athletes who are used to running miles, and all of a sudden they like cannot run miles, loss of hair, and erectile dysfunction. Even in young folks, erectile dysfunction. In this small study, 28% of those who were COVID positive all of a sudden experienced erectile dysfunction. From a pathophysiological point of view, it makes sense. But my point is, don't get caught up on only viewing this from a death point of view. View it from a quality of life and how you want to live your rest of your life and what kind of quality like you want to have. Did that answer your question, Dr. Sheila?
That actually, yes, that did. That did answer my question. I also am happy that you brought up the long hauler symptoms that people are having, and that they're happening too in younger people. In the beginning, at least from the people that I've been in contact with and some of the research I read, a lot of the research was actually coming out for people who were in really good health. Actually, they were in good health. They didn't have to be athletes. They could just be very active people that went to the gym, people took care of themselves, that ate correctly, and then got COVID. Did not have to be hospitalized. It was not even considered a severe case, but still weakness, can't walk, can't do a lot of things that they want to do. And it's really important, I think, for people to realize that, because they're associating COVID with death. And there's so much more to it than that. So much more to it, especially since you brought up the quality of life issue.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, what would you say to the younger people who are still hesitant to get the vaccine, especially people of color? What would you say to them? And let's talk about people 40 and under.
That is a great question. That's a great question. What this boils down to are the decisions that we choose to make. We all make about 35,000 decisions every day, but only about 1 to 2% of those are life-changing and life-altering. The other ones are inconsequential. They don't even matter, such as what to wear, or what to eat. But about 1 to 2% of those are life-changing and life-altering. And learning to focus on those decisions are absolutely key. Follow me. So as it relates to deciding about getting vaccinated, I would encourage you, don't be bamboozled, or as Malcolm X says, don't be hoodwinked. What I mean by that is they're acting like people don't want to get vaccinated because of vaccine hesitancy as it relates to the Tuskegee experiment. They are tying it to that. But here's what it really is. It's how the medical system treats Black folks today. When you go to the hospital and they make you wait longer, or it takes longer for you to get an appointment with your primary care doctor, or you see multiple primary care doctors within the same system, or they don't take care of your pain as well, or if you have a heart attack, they don't give you the same aggressive treatment. And by the way, all those examples that I just mentioned come from peer-reviewed academic articles which have proven what I just said as fact. What's my point is that what we have to do is, what the system needs to do is that we have got to get your trust again. So as a board certified emergency medicine physician, I apologize for how we have treated you in the past and how we treat you now. And we definitely need to work on it. However, we are in a crisis. And when you're in a crisis, we've got to do things differently. And I would encourage you to choose to trust the system, meaning trust the vaccine, and get vaccinated. It's 100% against protecting you from death. And the newest study showed that it's about 86% effective at preventing you from contracting COVID in the first place. And if you don't contract COVID, guess what? It means you cannot develop long haul symptoms and you cannot spread it to anyone else. So I would highly encourage you, don't go for the bamboozle. Don't go for the hoodwink. Choose to get vaccinated today. And there's not one physician I know, not one, Black, white, purple, and green, who has not been vaccinated and who has not aggressively sought to have their own family members vaccinated.
Excellent answer. And yeah, thank you. That answer almost can go to the over 40 population too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's actually almost the same principle. And I do want to just really stress the fact to the audience, the effectiveness of the vaccine in you not dying.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is very important, and especially in the minority communities who have been hit with death at a disproportionate amount because of the vaccine. Excuse me, because of the virus, not the vaccine, the virus, and because we're still hesitant in a lot of pockets in getting it. It's really something to consider. But so how is the country doing overall with the vaccine rollout, combating COVID-19, et cetera? How are we doing in America in general?
Well, in America, as it relates to vaccines, the rollout has been slow. We're seeing it become more available and more accessible. But I think that the medical community, as well as the radio and television community, we have to sell it to Black folks. We've got to make sure that they feel comfortable. Studies even prior to COVID have shown that people are more likely, as it relates to their health, to follow their primary care doctor or to a physician who looks like them, And so, given that only 5% of doctors in this entire country are Black, other physicians of different nationalities have to join this as well. And here's how. You can't just show up to somebody's community and be like, I'm a doctor, therefore do something, especially since if you have not been involved in the community. Now, follow me on this one. I'm going to tie this to what's going on in the world. George Floyd, some of these other cases. Physicians are asking the Black community and communities of color to trust them. But we don't see you in the community. We don't see you speaking out about matters that impact our community. So if physicians need to go out and convince people of color to take this vaccine, also be on our side, be on that community side as it relates to social justice issues. That's one way of engendering a favor with a community. Just don't show up to tell us, also show up to support us. Because while we have COVID going on, we have these protests that come from these cases. And as a result of those protests, the community spread of COVID is very likely to increase. I encourage the medical community, as well as TV and radio, put forth people who look like these communities first. And then if there's not enough people, go into these communities and support them in different ways as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you for that. Now, I was looking on the news. There are still 22 states that actually are having rising COVID rates. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I sure can. Let me put it in this context where everyone would understand. This time last year, Dr. Sheila, if you recall, we were in the first phase of this COVID. New York was being crushed, and we were all hoping it was not going to spread to these different states. And it spread. You can expect, and this does not come from any peer-reviewed academic journal. This comes from studying the science and watching what is going on. It's very likely it's going to spread to all the states. Here's why. Most of the new infections come from the new variants, comes from the new strains. Mainly the UK strain, which we already know is at least 55% more contagious, 55% more infectious, and preliminary data is showing it's about 35% more deadly. Hence, the reason why we see this pickup is because we have a more infectious strain, and we have opening of schools, opening of restaurants. Some states are saying don't wear masks. So there's a lot of combining factors which are going to lead to a fast rise and very likely a fourth wave.
Wow. So what can we do to protect ourselves as best we can from this fourth wave?
I love that. I love that. First, get vaccinated. And by the way, I have no stock in any of these companies. But I am the person. Keep this in mind. As an ER doctor, I'm that person who is putting tubes down people's throat. I'm the person who's sending people to the ICU, taking care of families. So I uniquely am aware of what COVID can do, and thus biases me against the vaccine. Look, I encourage people to get vaccinated. Wear your mask, socially distance. And if you are a person of color or if you're older, I highly encourage you to make sure that you have appropriate vitamin D levels. No, I didn't say multivitamins. I said vitamin D. The studies are consistent and they are clear now. If you start off this vitamin D deficient, meaning not enough vitamin D, you are A, 2 times more likely to contract COVID. B, if you contract COVID and you're not vitamin D sufficient, you are 10 to 12 times more likely to have a negative outcome. Give me just a few more seconds, Dr. Sheila, so I can bring this home. Most of our vitamin D comes from the sun. 90% of it comes from the sun. But the darker you are, the less efficient you are at converting sunlight to vitamin D. It is converted on your skin. Also, the older you are of any color, because of the skin changes, the less efficient you are at converting sunlight to vitamin D. Hence, 34% of Americans are vitamin D deficient, but yet 84% of Black Americans, 64% of older people are vitamin D deficient. So I would encourage you to check your vitamin D levels and to begin supplementation if you find it necessary. Keep in mind, Dr. Fauci, an older white male, he takes 6,000 units per day. The president of the free world, Donald Trump, we can all agree he had access to the best of care. What were the 3 vitamins that they gave him? Vitamin D, zinc, and melatonin. Vitamin D plays a unique role in the immune system. It's very helpful for you if you start off vitamin D sufficient.
Interesting. And vitamin D, you're talking about COVID, but vitamin D is important in so many, and so many diseases. It's really it's amazing. It's amazing. Yes. But for the best way, I understand the best way, and you of course know this better than me, but to get vitamin D is actual sunlight and conversion. And of course, you're right, the darker you are, the more difficult it can be. But still, taking a pill, most of us have to do that. But also supplementing with actual sunlight and letting the sun hit your skin without blocking with sunscreen. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
And then eating a diet rich in vitamin D, such as dairy products, fatty fish, mackerel, tuna, salmon. But you highlight the most important part, Dr. Sheila, making sure you go out in the sun and you expose your skin to the sun. And for anyone who has any doubts, I would look at it from a risk-benefit point of view. It's low risk for you to go outside and get sunlight. And then at least you know that you're not risking that you're decreasing the risk of you being vitamin D deficient.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you this question, and this is mostly because I am curious, and you can say as much as you want. But when you are in the ER and someone comes in with COVID, can you kind of describe what is going on with them when they come in?
Great question. So there are 2 types. I would look at it 2 ways: those who I admit and those who I send home. Because keep in mind that only about 3% of people are admitted. For those who I send home, it's often shortness of breath, body aches, them not feeling well. Many of them feel horrible, and some of them have a cough. And some of them meet if it weren't COVID, some of them probably would have been admitted to the hospital. But mainly, as long as you're oxygenating, not showing any signs of overclotting, you are discharged home. Now, for those people who are admitted, the most common reason that you get admitted to the hospital is because of the increasing shortness of breath that's related to your oxygenation. And so because you have enough oxygen in your blood, and often that's related to all the fluid that starts to build in your lung as a result of the immune response that COVID has created. And by the way, that immune response is regulated by vitamin D. But like back to like those patients often have a lot of fluid in their lungs, which require them to either get a tube, to be admitted for high flow oxygen. And then just like keep in mind, COVID causes too much clotting. So there are young people who have heart attacks, who have strokes, who have clots. There are a myriad of different things that COVID caused, and we're soon going to see literature on all that COVID caused. Right now, all that COVID causes. Right now, we mainly know about the breathing, the different strokes, the different heart attacks, but it's usually the breathing that gets you admitted to the hospital. Now, on a different note, listen, people. Now, this is probably one of the most important things that I am going to say. If you've not contracted COVID, congratulations. But it's very likely that you, a loved one, or someone you know, are going to contract COVID. And just know there's another treatment out there besides being vaccinated. It's called monoclonal antibodies. Monoclonal antibodies. President Trump got those as well. They are fake antibodies, man-made antibodies that they infuse in you with an IV. That 86%, that makes you 86% less likely to have a negative outcome as it relates to like COVID. But you must present within the first 10 days of having symptoms. But the earlier you present, the better. The earlier you present, the better. And they are and they're free, and they are at different hospitals across the state. Most ERs do not get them. So once you become COVID positive, make sure you call your primary care doctor or go online and look up local monoclonal antibody treatment sites.
Oh. So this is something that we non-physicians can investigate and get on our own.
Yeah. So what do? You investigate, and then you call that site, and then they will ask you questions. In the ERs I work in, that I send people home, and I don't make the call for the monoclonal antibody sites. I tell them where it is, or I tell them how to access that number. When you call, there are a series of questions they're going to ask you. Not everyone qualifies. One of the qualifications are, if you're over 65, you automatically qualify. If you're over 55 and you have high blood pressure, COPD, heart problems, you qualify. And this is the big one that I have to admit, many of my colleagues miss, but it's on the website. If you are morbidly obese of any age, you qualify for monoclonal antibodies. Again, monoclonal antibodies. CNN just did a great report last week. It talks about, it's probably one of our underused treatments, and probably because it just has not been advertised well.
Right. And I don't think people knew that we could have a partnership in finding out how to get it. You hear the words, and the words are quite, they're many syllables, and you're like, what are they talking about? But a lot of people still put everything in the hands of the physician. So we don't really think this is something that we should even investigate. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because this is the first time I'm actually even hearing this.
But actually, Dr. Sheila, you just touched on the biggest point of all, and you brilliantly touched on it. People, have gotten accustomed to always relying on their doctors.
Mm-hmm.
I would encourage people to be your biggest advocate, to do your own research. I have never seen doctors more busy than now. They can have the best of intentions, but some information you've got to Google, figure out on your own, or direct your doctor. Even the monoclonal antibodies, I would bet you most primary care doctors don't know where these sites are. But if you Google monoclonal antibodies, there are many websites that will come up, and just you put in your zip code and it will tell you where those sites are. And take that or call your primary care doctor with that.
Very interesting. Yeah, I always tell everybody, I know I am my doctor's like worst patients. I am in there, they are telling me something, and I'm literally have my phone on looking it up as they're talking. And then I ask them a million questions, and they're like, oh my gosh, well, she put her phone away. But you're right. You have to really direct your own care. You really do. You can, your doctor will, be able to give you what you need. But if you have questions, you really shouldn't be hesitant to ask. And most appreciate it. So, yeah, I really like that point that you made. But let me ask you this. Do you think that the vaccine hesitancy throughout the country is getting better? Because we touched on it in the beginning, but we didn't really say kind of what the status of it is from your viewpoint of what you see as a physician.
I thought it was. But then when you hear data that 40% of the military are vaccine hesitant, which I find amazing because they take more different types of vaccines than anyone. When you hear that, and this is not me talking, this is what the data, what the reports say, that 30% of President Trump supporters are vaccine hesitant. It makes you wonder, how we're going to get past this, because we need people vaccinated. Why? Don't forget something that I said early on. Every time that virus infects someone, it's an opportunity for it to mutate, for it to change. Hence, the way you decrease that is you have it infect less people. The way you have it infect less people is that you vaccinate people. You vaccinate people, and that decreases the likelihood of that virus being able to change. So, in answer to your question, Dr. Sheila, I used to have a sense, but right now I am a little concerned about the hesitancy overall within the country.
Oh, that's a little disheartening, but that's America too. Do you have any thoughts on the it's not so much controversy, but the Johnson & Johnson vaccine and what is going on with that? I know they paused it, but do you have any thoughts on that vaccine? Because it may come back on the market for distribution.
I have very clear thoughts. I think that because of the overall picture of vaccines, the government chose to be overly cautious. Keep in mind, there were 6 people out of 6.8 million people who developed this venous clot. From a medical point of view, that's a very low risk. That's 1 in 1 million. Let's just get away from my COVID. If you have 1 million people pre-COVID, about 4 of them would have developed a clot. 1 million people, about 4 of them would have developed a clot. As relates to the vaccination, to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, it's only been 1 in 1 million. So technically, the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is not doing bad at all. But I understand why the FDA did it, because the FDA is viewed as the world leader authority. And could you imagine that had they not done it, and then the press leaked it out, trying to get that horse back in the barn would have been difficult. And then one final question: just keep in mind, those 6, it happened in a midnight group of people. There were women who were under the age of 50. And who many were on birth control pills as well. So it is a very small group of like people. But it's something that we've got to stop, pause, and look at.
Yeah. And I really hope that that does not increase the hesitancy of Americans taking vaccines in general, but particularly that one. They all seem to really have, really good effectiveness. So I understand why they did. I'm like you, I understand why they did it, but I just hope it doesn't change the perception of the vaccine.
You and I are on the same page, and I just want your audience to like know that if I weren't vaccinated now and they offered me the Johnson & I would happily take it. If they would offer it to any of my family members, I would happily take it. So let's be very, very clear. Now, if you are a woman between the age of 18 and 50 and you're on oral birth control pills and you're worried, just don't take the Johnson & Johnson. Take one of the other two.
Right. Yeah. Birth control pills, and I haven't kept it, but I know they they used to have a big black box one or whatever for blood clots.
You
They
are
actually
correct.
had that even
You are
before.
correct.
So yeah. So yeah. So that risk, and when you put the numbers in there, the 1 in a million or whatever, the really
Yes.
small number that you said, is every life, it has meaning, but statistically, it's really statistically kind of insignificant. The numbers, not the people,
Right.
but the
Right. And
numbers.
I do want to say something. So I want to say that rather, there was not an association with oral birth control pills, but they were all women less than 50 years old.
I see. Okay. Because I had also heard birth control pills, and I also heard obesity.
Yes.
So, but if it's not completely documented, then we don't need to put that out there. But I did,
Right.
but I thought it was out there even more. But so what can, and this is a question related, but not quite. What can minorities do? Because it is African American, it's also Spanish, it's a lot of minorities. What can we do to really combat the disparities that we find in healthcare from your point of view?
Ooh, that is a great question.
I know that's a loaded question. You see, I waited a while before I asked it, but that's, it's important.
Well, what I would recommend is that when you go to your primary care appointment, make sure you go with your own set of questions. I would go with my own set of like questions. I would also make it a point of insisting that you have the same primary care doctor every time. The studies are very clear, especially as it relates to like Black males, that for once you eat, even after you adjust for insurance, for some reason they see multiple primary care doctors. The reason why that's important is because primary care is about establishing a relationship, a rapport. And then when you have to switch doctors a lot, that's not established, and sometimes things are missed. So A, make sure you go in there with like your own set of questions. B, be your own advocate as it relates to making sure you see the same primary care doctor. 3, if you don't feel comfortable with something that they were asking you to like do or like test, please feel free to speak up then. And then 4, just so you know, there's always a patient advocate. There's always a patient advocate someplace where you say, well, I go to my doctor's primary care office. There's somebody in there who's expected to be a patient care advocate. And let me tell you why. All of us who are licensed, we have a governing body that we are accountable to. And as it relates to like that, we always want the concerns to be addressed from our office or from our hospital than to go up to our licensing governing body.
Yeah. Really good tips. Really good. Yeah. So my next question has to do with travel. So because a lot of people are starting to travel, I'm guessing some of them are vaccinated, some of them are not. But what are your thoughts on travel? Do you think it's too early? Do you think if you vaccinated, it's okay? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, and I'm gonna give you a few tips. But I did a whole video on this. They go to
Oh,
youtube.com/Dr. Joffrey. That's Dr. Joffrey, Geoffrey. Ideally, if you could not travel, then you should not travel. But if you are vaccinated, as the CDC has said, it is safer for you to travel than not being vaccinated. And I get it. People want to like get out, and people are getting antsy. But if you're not unvaccinated, if you are unvaccinated, I highly recommend that you do not travel, because every person you come in contact with, there is some kind of risk. So if you're not vaccinated, I highly recommend that you do not travel.
okay. And does that same advice go for, because so many things are opening up?
Yeah.
And I doubt if they'll close again or shut down. I think, we're kind of open with restrictions, and we'll just have restrictions lifted as time goes. But what about eating out or social?
That's great. That's a great question. Let me frame it this way. There are 5 places that are accountable for 80% of the transmissions. 5 places. Those are restaurants, bars and coffee shops, hotels, places of worship, and gyms, with the restaurants accounting for 40% of those. Restaurants accounting for 40% of those, and that's the indoor dining. So I would just say that there is a considerable risk by dining indoor at a restaurant.
Wow. Yeah. Those numbers are significant.
Now that they are, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's quite high. Okay, wow. So is there anything else that you think we can touch on to help the public understand risks of COVID, benefits of the vaccination? We've, gone through a lot of information about them, and you've given excellent information and broke it down a little bit more so that it's even easier for us to understand what COVID-19 is, the status across the country, and then also what we can do to protect ourselves. But what would be a good or a main takeaway that you would have for the public regarding keeping themselves safe from this virus?
Thank you very much for that question. I would say that it's about the decisions. Seriously, it's about the decisions that you make as it relates to your life and the life of your family. I hear a lot of complaints and comments about, well, they didn't tell us this and they didn't tell us that, or this has changed. It's a changing and growing process. But what we do know is that you can decide to be safe. You can decide to make sure that you don't go into high risk areas. You can decide to be vaccinated. But most importantly, the split second decisions you make, meaning that if you're going to decide that you're all of a sudden not going to wear a mask, that's a split second decision that has major consequences. I think that first, keep in mind that we're going to be in this COVID space for a little longer. I am not even one who's willing to bet that the kids will be in school this fall. I am not saying I'm not willing to bet that. Many colleges will be. Why? Because many colleges are appropriately requiring students to be vaccinated prior to getting back. So in summary, what I would say, I would highly recommend you get vaccinated. And unless you've got some clear and resounding evidence, data-based evidence for you not to, then I would highly recommend you get vaccinated. And let me just assure you, that evidence for not being vaccinated does not exist. It's just hearsay and people making up stuff. If you want to live, if you want to have a regular quality of life when we're done with COVID, you greatly increase the likelihood of that by getting vaccinated. And by the way, getting vaccinated is free now.
Right. I do like the way you put that. If you want to live, that's pretty straightforward.
And not only that, did you hear me talk about the quality of life? Because you can get COVID, and I say this to my daughter's friends. My daughter is like 18. She's vaccinated, but her friends who are hesitant, I say, just keep in mind, a fair number of people lose their hair, and we don't know for how long. I found that for younger people, especially when the women hear that really motivates them to reconsider their position on not being vaccinated.
Well, I'll back up and go to the other side, because towards the beginning of our conversation, when we were talking about long haulers and you said erectile dysfunction, I'm thinking a lot of men's ears might have picked up on that too.
I didn't want to say it again, but whenever I give you I get the most questions about that.
Because I'm a pelvic health. I do pelvic health physical therapy. So that's what I do. So when you said that, and I just thought that was really interesting, because I will bring that up on some of my talks now. I will put that in, I'll go back and do a little bit more research on it, put it in some of my talks, because that is one thing, when you're talking about men, you talk, incontinence, blah, blah, blah. Some things they'll accept. When you get to erectile dysfunction, it's like E.F. Hutton says back in the day. Everybody leans forward and they're like listening. So yeah, I thought that was.
Imagine an 18-year-old or 25-year-old, 30-year-old experiencing that. I mean, if you get 60, 70, you kind of know it may be coming. But
right.
18 and experience, I would be getting vaccinated right away. I would be the first in line every day saying, is there any left over?
Yeah. That might have to be in a PSA for the vaccinations, because that will, get rid of some of that hesitancy that people do have. Yeah, that was really, really funny. And I picked up on it in the beginning, but I just kind of was like, that's really interesting. But I just kind of let it go. But, I was going to bring it back up later, because I just thought that was really, really good.
Well, that's why you do your show so well, because you made sure that we made it back to it. Because I actually think that was a very salient and very important point.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Because you know what? Because I feel that I do these shows for education for the public, but there are certain things, and even as both of us are talking, things kind of stick out. And just like they stick out to me, they'll stick out to the general public. And I don't want it to go, in and then just kind of go out and I didn't, they said that, but, maybe it wasn't important. If it's something that sticks out to me, I'm going to assume it sticks out to somebody else. So I just really want to kind of hone that point in, just in case. But I'm going to, I put your information on the screen, your YouTube information, and I'm also going to put your email. But I did want to talk, we have probably about 5 minutes left. I wanted to give you the opportunity to talk about your book, or books with an S. Can you talk about that? That's, really interesting.
Sure. Thank you very much. My second bestseller is called Train Your Mind to Make Split-Second Decisions. In other words, it's a book that if you have problems making decisions after reading this, most people say that they're better at making them. Here's why. Most people are worried about all the different decisions that they have to make. If you focus on the split-second decisions, which are the most important ones, you improve those and you improve your decision-making IQ overall. And I can tell you, as a result of going through a pandemic, as a result of everything that has happened, being a key and keen decision maker is absolutely essential, especially since many of us found ourselves as executives within our own house, managing who comes and goes, managing all that goes on as a result of being in a pandemic. So I would encourage you, for more information about it, you can go to splitsecond.decisions.com, splitsecond.decisions.com. I go around different companies and train people, train teams, train executives how to make split-second decisions and how to deal with their blind spots. And those blind spots are simply, sometimes they are racial, but they're just those spots that we may miss. And as an executive, to have a training, I've done many Fortune 500 companies, hands down, it's one of the key and essential trainings. Now, for my passion, I have a bestseller out. It's called 11 Steps for Surviving Encounters with the Police from 2017. The reason why I highlight 2017 is, and then a second copy came out in 2019. I'm just not new to this game. I'm passionate about this game. I'm passionate about this issue, this new space we are in as it relates to people of color and officers. And the one thing that I can say, the one most important thing is, while it's not fair and it is not right, but until we can fix this, we need to be training our Black boys, our Black young ladies, how to interact with officers when stopped. Pause before anybody says it. I already said it's not fair. I already said that it is not right. But what I do know is that the number of Blacks being killed by the police has not changed since this time last year. And we all have heard about the George Floyd protests across the world. The number of killings has not changed. So until Congress can fix it, our local authorities and the police, we have to do something right now to teach our young folks how to act when stopped by the police. And somebody's going to say, well, Dr. Jarver, you're a doctor, you don't have that problem. Are you kidding me? When police pull me over, they don't pull me over and say, hey, Dr. Jarver. They pull me over because I'm a Black man. And so I had to train myself. My point is, people, let's make sure that your kids and our loved ones get home. Once you get home, then you can fight whatever battles of anything that went wrong. If something went wrong, fight them from making it home. Fight them by the fact that you're home alive and that you can go back and file whatever reports you need.
So important. Yeah. So important. Yeah. Yeah. This state, I'm almost speechless about the second part of your statement about police brutality and getting home safe. Those of us who have not young, but even 20, 30 teenage children, it is a frightening time. But it's been a frightening time, at least for me. I realized it for years. So it feels like it's kind of come to a head now. But this has been going on even, what we were growing up.
Yeah.
It really is almost very similar. There just were not cameras.
Yes.
And it was not, things happen and you would tell people close to you, but not a lot of people knew. But I don't know if there's any African-American person over the age of 50 who doesn't have a story.
I don't know what.
Yeah, several stories. I don't know any either. I really don't. I don't. And still getting stories, as a matter of fact, because it doesn't stop as you get older, depending on what you do and where you are. It actually doesn't stop. But yeah, that's something that we have got to work on. We've got to work on. It's been going on for years. It's really time for it to stop.
And we need the good officers, and most of them are good, to speak up, to step up and say, hey, yes, what we're wrong here. Because in my studies, I have to admit, I didn't run across any case where an officer did not respond to somebody who needed help, no matter what color they were. If they were in acute issue, officers 100% of the time perform. So there are good officers out there. Most of them are. It's these rogue officers that we need people to speak up on. But Dr. Sheila, do you mind if I pivot? Because I know someone put a question in here, and their question suggests to me that I may have said something wrong. As it relates to erectile dysfunction, that was if you get COVID. That was only if you get COVID. It had nothing to do with the vaccine. So again, audience, let me be clear. The erectile dysfunction, the loss of hair, all that comes from contracting COVID. It has zilch, nothing to do with the vaccine.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for number one, thank you for catching the question, and thank you for clarifying that for the audience because, right, we do not want to give out any misinformation. So thank you. Thank you. Well, it has actually been a pleasure. Um, I really am happy that you decided to come on to the show. I think this was really beneficial to everybody who was able to listen and the people who are going to be able to listen going down the line. I get people listening to the show really for weeks afterwards. People do listen, so they're always out there. They're out there on our streaming channels, and they're also on Facebook Live if you're a Facebook user. So I'll close out the show in a minute, but I am going to thank Dr. Jeffrey Mount Varner for coming to the show. I don't want to hold you because, as a physician, he is busy. So I'm going to let him come up out of the studio and then I can just close up. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming, Dr. Varner. And I hope that you have a great day. And believe me, the public and myself really, really appreciate the information that you were able to give us.
And thank you so much for having me. Most importantly, thank you for what you do for the community as well. And be safe and be well.
Thank you. You too. You too. And for everyone else, I'm going to just run just a quick video here, say a couple closing words, and we will be done. Now, thank you all so much again. Thank you for joining me. I did want to let you know that if you are anyone who is suffering from bladder leaks, men or women, there is help. Bladder leaks are not something that is that you have to have, that you have to suffer with. And there are programs that are available .com. That is my website, and from there you can contact me. You can get a little bit more information. I have blogs on there. You can get information on sleep and bladder leaks, what is overactive bladder, things like that. So I appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you next time on Living Well with Dr. Sheila. Take care and bye-bye until next time.